So about a year ago, I decided to build my first online marketplace, and until today, I've actually been building 4 online marketplaces myself. In this video, I'll take you through the thought process that I always go through before I start building an online marketplace, and also how I then build it and how I do marketing for all my marketplaces. Let's do it. So first of all, before you start building, it's always good to try and think about if you're actually solving a real problem by building your marketplace. And usually the best way to figure that out is if you had this problem yourself, and the reason why you're building your marketplace is to solve your own problem. So in my instance, for instance, when I built Naughty Mox, it was actually not my own problem, it was my mom's problem. My mom, she's a huge collector of Moomin Mox. She has hundreds of them and she's buying all the new ones that are coming out. And I could see that there was a lot of scattered Facebook groups, Reddit groups, there are some local marketplaces, but there wasn't really a international marketplace where international buyers could buy from sellers in the Nordic region. So that was the whole aim with Nordic Mox, to basically make it easier to buy as an international buyer from a Nordic seller, because it's quite difficult to basically get a hold of these Moomin Mox if you're outside the Nordic region. Similarly with MySpareDesk, another marketplace that I built, which is a marketplace for basically turning your home into a co-working space. The idea with that one was that I thought that sometimes it would be really nice to have someone coming over to your house if you have a spare desk, because it would be nice just as a remote worker to have some company now and then. And most people, they actually have spare desk, especially after COVID, right? Because they have the whole setup at their home, because they basically had to during COVID, because everyone was working at home at that time. So most people have the setup, they are just not using it for that spare kind of coworker that could be there while you're also working. So the idea there was that you could easily invite people to come over to your house and they could work and pay you a little bit of money for that while you're also working. I did realize though, after launching it on different forums, Reddit, Product Hunt and so on, that a lot of people are very much against this idea, because most remote workers are actually introverts, they're not extroverts. So the reason why they are remote workers are usually because they like being all by themselves, not being disturbed by anyone. So always try and think if you had any problems that you can solve by building your marketplace. And once you've then made a decision on what you should be building and what problem you're solving, then of course you start building your MVP. And then it's all about figuring out what features that should be in that MVP. And that depends a little bit on the existing market out there actually. So is your idea for your marketplace totally unique, or is there something out there already that is a little bit similar to your idea? So if there's something out there already that is a little bit similar to your idea, then you should decide on one specific feature that makes your marketplace unique, that distinguish your marketplace from the existing one out there. And then you should build your MVP and that unique feature and then launch it. As developers, we love building, and it's very comfortable just to sit every day and build and make this feature and then the next feature and then one more feature, and we believe that that is gonna make it awesome and people are just gonna be turning up and start using our marketplace. But that's usually not how it is. So it's always best, in my opinion, to decide on exactly what your MVP should include to basically make your marketplace unique, and then build that. Of course, if you have a very unique idea and there's nothing out there already that is similar to your marketplace, then you should just build the MVP, because a marketplace always consists of the same things basically. So there's always authentication, there's always a create listing area, there's a users area, there's a sign up area and so on, right? So if your idea is already super unique, then you should just build the basics that all marketplaces have basically. But if your idea is not 100% unique, then you should build something on top of that. So for instance, for Naughty Mox, I was trying to make it stand out a little bit. So I built a wish list feature. I built a kind of a feature where you can see what mocks you already have, so you can basically put them and then showcase them to other people and so on, right? So similarly, if you are in an area where there's already a marketplace out there that is a little bit similar to your idea, you should come up with something that makes your marketplace stand out. That is important, because marketing wise it's just going to be much easier then. And always remember that the reason why we call it an MVP, a minimal viable product, is because we have an idea, we have a vision of something that might be possible. So we build the minimal version of that vision, you could say, and then we get it out there, and then we see if we can actually get people to use it. So if you build your MVP and you get it out there, and it is very difficult for you to get anyone to sign up on the seller side, on the buyer side, and actually I have a video on how to solve the chicken and the egg issue, but if you are struggling with that after you build your MVP, then it might be very difficult for you going forward, right? So that is the reason why we call it an MVP, so that in this case, if this happens, then at least you haven't been using too long time on your product, and then you can decide if you're just gonna be ditching it or if you leave it there or whatever you want to do then, right? But that is the reason why, like you don't want to be building everything, every feature that you have in mind and then figure out no one is actually using whatever you built, right? So always go for the MVP and then maybe one unique feature to make it stand out if you have a competitor in the market, and then launch it, try and solve the chicken and the egg issue, and that's it. And then while you're building your marketplace idea, you might as well start talking about it so that you have some followers already when you launch, right? So the easiest way you could do it is just to have a very simple sign up page on your page. So you buy a domain name and then you make a very, very simple sign up page just so you collect their email addresses, so that on your actual launch date, you actually have some people you can send an email to, and then they hopefully sign up and maybe become sellers on your marketplace. Or you could also just force yourself to, like every day or every second day, tweet about something that you made that day on your marketplace, on the upcoming marketplace, right? So what I usually do is that I have put in my calendar, like every day or every second day, that I have to write something on Twitter, and then I try and make a YouTube video like this one every week or every second week. But it is super important to also talk about what you're building. So the whole marketing aspect of whatever you're building is just as important as the actual product actually, right? So I would say you should probably use 50% of your time on marketing, because in the end, the easy part is the building part. You can always figure out how to build it. Yes, there are going to be some hiccups here and there, but in the end, you're going to be figuring it out. But marketing wise, that is always much, much harder. Can you actually get people to then use your marketplace? So that's why it is super, super important to start talking about what you're building, to basically create some buzz, some followers for your marketplace, so that you actually have some people starting to use your marketplace once you then launch it. That is actually also what I did for GuardYourConnect.com, which is a Stripe Connect fraud prevention tool. It's not a marketplace, but I started talking about that one on my Twitter and also here on YouTube. And similarly, I also have an upcoming tool which is called MemoryMatchGPT.com, which you can go and sign up for right now. And then regarding what tools to use for building your MVP and what frameworks, coding language, and so on, I would pretty much always say stick to what you already know. So if you already know how to code in Python or in React or in whatever, then stick to that and just become better and better at doing that, so that you will be able to basically build faster and faster. But of course, if you are not a developer right now, then maybe find a boilerplate out there, do a coding course out there, and then figure out how to build that way, right? But of course, if you are stuck doing something quite old-fashioned, like for instance, if you're still coding in pure JavaScript, HTML, CSS, I would say, okay, that's basically dumb right now, because there are so many frameworks out there that will just help you build much, much faster. So then I would say you need to basically choose something more modern. Also, if you are coding without using AI at all, I would say that's also actually dumb now, because using AI, you will be able to build so much faster. Having said that though, you should also not only be using AI, because I've heard of so many coders or non-technical people that start using AI and then they basically get caught in this kind of AI loop where they maybe build 100% of their code using AI. They have no idea what language it built in, what it actually did. So they are basically stuck, right? They have no idea how the code works. And if they want to change something, then maybe they can't do it because they are 100% dependent on AI. They have no no idea what the AI actually built for them. And that is just gonna create more problems for you than it actually solves, right? So always use AI as an assistant, a very intelligent assistant that is sitting right next to you, that is probably coding better than you if you actually tell it what to code, right? So you need to know the basics, you need to have an overview, kind of a roadmap for what you're going to be building, and then you ask AI step by step to build that for you. So for instance, for a marketplace, you need to have authentication, you need to have a create listing page, you need to have a users area, and so on, right? So if you already have that in mind, you have that in your roadmap, then you basically start asking AI step by step what to build, right? So create the create listing area for me, it's a protected area, and so on and so on. And maybe you also need this special feature, and then you tell AI to basically build that for you. Don't tell it all by once to just go mad and just build, because if you do that, you are just gonna have a very messy code and you have no idea how it works. So that is just not gonna end well for sure, I can tell you that, and I've heard so many stories about this. So that is not the way to do it. Instead, use AI as an assistant and then do it step by step. And just regarding tools again, right? So if you're used to using MongoDB, for instance, and Next.js and maybe Tailwind, like I am, these are actually my 3 favorites, and I've been using them for years now and I love them, right? But now and then I do hear about something else, like maybe a database that could be a little bit faster, a little bit smarter to integrate towards, and so on, right? But unless it's something that I can see and feel that really makes me much faster at coding, then I will not switch, because I know that it will also take a long time to get to know that new tool. So unless it really feels like something that can provide me exceptional more value and make me much faster at coding, then I'm not gonna make the switch, because it's just not worth it. And why would I switch to something else? The user in the end, the buyer, the seller on a marketplace, for instance, they don't care if it's built in PHP or in Next.js or in React or whatever it's built in, right? So they don't care at all. They just want it to work and to able to do whatever you want them to do on the marketplace. So always have that in mind. So again, if you hear about a new tool, then unless it really feels and you can see that this is gonna make you much faster at coding, then I wouldn't switch. Instead, just become good at what you already chose. Keep on building so that you become faster and faster at building using these tools that you chose. And then for your launch, I think it's best not to have too high expectations on how it's gonna go, right? Because usually you launch and it's kind of a downer, and then not that much happens. You get a couple of signups, you get 1 or 2 buying customers, and that's it. Usually we hear about all these glamorous stories about some company launching and they got like the first 5,000 users and they made 10K in 1 day or something like that, right? Or there was a company recently, Cluely, that got 15 million in funding without even having a product. But usually it's not like that, right? And you can see on Product Hunt, there are more than 200 launches every day. And it's actually also very interesting to go back and see some of the old launches from like Stripe, for instance, or Airbnb and so on, right? When they launched, it didn't happen over like at 1 day, right? It took a long time. So they launched and then they kept on launching. A good sign is that if you launch and something happens, that's good, right? So maybe you get the first 10 signups and you get 1 or 2 paying customers or something like that, right? That is good. And then you just keep on iterating based on the feedback you maybe get from those signups, and you make some new features and then you launch again. And you of course launch different places, right? So you start by launching maybe on Product Hunt, then you launch on Reddit, and then you launch somewhere else, maybe on Facebook or something like that afterwards, right? That is very normal, and that's how most startups do it. And then lastly, just around pricing, right? So usually you want to try and get feedback from someone who actually paid you some money, because those are the best ones to get feedback from. But of course, on a marketplace, it's a little bit different, because on a marketplace, you want to try and get feedback usually from sellers or from a buyer who bought from a seller. But in the very beginning, you could try and get some feedback from a seller. Maybe they have some feedback on the listing process and so on, right? But if you're building a regular SaaS, then always try and get feedback from someone who actually bought. And usually a good strategy, at least I would say so in the beginning, is not to have any free plans, because the freemiums that you get in on your SaaS, then they are not gonna be the ones that you want to get feedback from, and you're just going to be wasting a lot of money on them actually, because you can't really use them for anything, and usually it's very hard to convince them to actually go on a paying plan, right? So that's why usually it's best, I would say, unless you have a lot of money in the bank, maybe you got funded or something like that, then maybe have a free plan as well. But if you don't have a lot of money, then only have paid plans, right? So you could have a very cheap plan, right? So the lowest one could be, I don't know, $5-10 a month or something like that, right? But as long as you get someone in that actually pays you, then it's a very good user, because they actually put up some money, and then you can ask them for feedback and then iterate based on whatever they say, right? So that's at least my opinion on the pricing area. Okay guys, this is it for this one. So if you're building a marketplace, then remember to check out my boilerplate speed build marketplace, and if you're non-technical, then you can check out my course. It is also on speedbuildmarketplace.com. Always just reach out to me if you have any questions, and until next time, see you guys. Bye bye. Ciao.